So if you've been on the internet for basically any time in the past 3 to/4 years, you'll remember the Try Guys scandal. Now, the Try Guys scandal was something else. I'm going to go over it briefly, and I'll put a timestamp if you want to skip it, just refreshing you on what happened or letting you know in a very short way what happened. Regardless, before we get into that, basically what this video is going to be about is Ned Fulmer and his trajectory into what I think is some type of midlife crisis, because truly I think he's crashing and burning and actively making everything worse for himself, which is saying a lot, because once you're caught cheating, you're kicked off a show you were part of, you divorce your wife, you have a kid with this wife, like, you'd think that that was all pretty bad alone, but things have gotten to some degree worse in terms of what we see on the outside, right? Before we get into all of that, let me talk about what the drama was in the first place to kind of frame Ned Fulmer, because I think it's important to remember why he's so disliked, and also to contextualize what he's going to say later in clips from his podcast, which I unfortunately listened to the whole episode. So I'll link this article with the full summary because it's a pretty in-depth article, but it says, the quartet, so the 4 members of the Try Guys, imploded after Ned admitted to cheating on his wife, Ariel Fulmer, which only happened after a full-on investigation took place over the internet. Here's the whole messy timeline if you're just getting caught up to speed. To make a long story short, a fan created a Twitter thread to consolidate the info once fans began to realize that Ned was no longer making appearances in the newest Try Guys video. Case in point, both Ned and producer Alex Herring, the person he was caught cheating with, were seen in an Instagram pic with the rest of the group while they were promoting Keith's Eat the Menu series at Caesar's Palace Buffet. However, they were not seen in the final cut of the video. Fans also pointed out that Ned does not appear in the past 3 videos or intros. He was also not in the past 3 podcast episodes, and Ariel wasn't present in the previous 2 episodes of You Can Sit With Us, a podcast hosted by the wives of the Try Guys. So then at one point, the Try Guys Instagram posted an official announcement saying Ned Fulmer is no longer working with the Try Guys. As a result of a thorough internal review, we do not see a path forward together. We thank you for your support as we navigate this change. So then Ned Fulmer posts his own statement, which was... you'll just see. And his statement says, family should have always been my priority, but I lost focus and had a consensual workplace relationship. I'm sorry for any pain that my actions may have caused to the guys and fans, but most of all to Ariel, his wife at the time. The only thing that matters right now is my marriage and my children, and that's where I'm going to focus my attention. So now you're caught up. All of this happened in 2022, in the last few months. I believe it was around September. So that is the central scandal that made Ned Fulmer, really just kind of disappear, in the sense of he wasn't on the Try Guys anymore. SNL even did a skit based on the situation. He was talked about, but barely seen to an extent. That's also part of the reason why it's kind of a big deal that he's back, because the way he left the internet, even though he's still been posting and stuff, the way he left was less than ideal, and it kind of just was him framed as a piece of shit because he behaved like a piece of shit, so whatever. But now he's trying to come back and rebrand, I guess, ? And part of that rebrand apparently is doing a podcast episode with Ariel, the ex-wife. And I listened to that on the way home from school thinking, oh, this is going to be so interesting, whatever. Not really. Not very interesting, very long-winded, a lot of sighs, a lot of yas. I have an issue with the editing, but let me get past that. There are some very key moments in there, though, that I think are framing exactly why Ned Fulmer, it can't come back in the way he wants to, in my opinion. And maybe he will be able to at some point, but the way in which he's doing things right now is... when someone does something wrong and they kind of say that they're taking responsibility, but then they act like they didn't do anything wrong, so you're like, okay, are you guilty or are you not guilty? And why isn't what you're doing matching with what you're saying? So let's look at a couple of clips that had people screaming.
Not only did you having an affair it shattered our marriage, but it also, all of that guilt and shame, you, hoisted that on me. You gave that to me. And now I have to carry that around for the rest of my life.
I don't think it's fair that as a society you're put in that position. It's certainly not true. And no, it's not something that I imagined as I was doing that. I think none of it was.
So maybe after this clip, you can understand what I mean when there's a whole lot of nothing. Like everything he just said here, apart from it being bullshit, and we'll get into that, but it's a whole bunch of word salad, like as a society. And it's like, this has nothing to do with society's treatment of women. Truly, we're not gonna go into some gendered, nuanced point of view, feminist, whatever. That is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is your specific actions, as in you, the twerp, Ned Fulmer. We're talking about you and what you did to your own family. Not this big whole society. We're not going there. So the fact that he posited it that way is exactly what I'm talking about when I say taking accountability, but. And if you're saying sorry, but, you're not saying sorry. That's just a rule that I think all of us learned when we turned, 12. So this whole concept is just crazy to me. Seeing this clip actually pushed me to listen to this podcast because I'm like, surely it can't be as bad as all of these like tiny little clips of, I think the episode is like an hour and a half. It's actually just that bad. I listened to the whole thing and you can basically cut it anywhere and it's still a relatively realistic view of what happened in that episode in its entirety. I do also think that there's this weird kind of almost funny, not because of the situation, but it's like he's sitting there kind of like this little guy who just like made a little quirky mistake, and it's like, dude, you run this podcast, I believe, right? So it's like you chose to put yourself in this situation. Don't do the shrimpy, oh, woe is me because I acted shittily and was unfaithful. You're not the victim here, and I don't even think Ariel wants to be seen as a victim as much as to just tell you you fucked up, and you fucked up, obviously. But the entire thing just, I didn't see anyone be on Ned Fulmer's side in this. Like at all. I didn't see anyone even say anything positive about it. Just, it blew up in his face, in my opinion. If anything, it got viewership, that's for sure.
I understand that pilot episode is a super uncomfortable conversation to watch. It's not a pleasant subject matter for anyone to contemplate, but one reason why I wanted to do the show was to not shy away from those sort of conversations. When I see like some of these clips that are pulled out, like it's cringeworthy. I see how like I am not perfect in that moment. I know that full hour we were both really proud of and both like stood behind, and that full hour is just like one snippet of like 3 years of work and of those sort of conversations. I think people can interpret it however they want to interpret it. I know it's a show and it's work that I'm excited to put out there and stand behind. I think there's also something kind of freeing in just having it all out there and just being like, it happened. I did that. This is who I am now, and this is how I'm moving forward and trying to live my life.
So this clip here is Ned Fulmer on another show, just sitting down, talking to people about his interview. Granted, this is a small clip, and this is, I think, the only clip I'm going to include that's from an interview without showing you the entire interview or giving you more context. But I think that this is important in terms of even what we just discussed of that snippet I just showed you with Ariel, because he's admitting that it's cringe, and I think that he's realized getting the feedback that he's not getting the reaction he wanted, because I think the reaction he wanted, I think the normal reaction anyone would desire is some level of public redemption. You want the public to see you and think, oh man, like, he fucked up, but good for him for taking responsibility. Like, I think that he wanted that. And I think even furthermore, I think he ideally wanted people to start the trajectory of forgiving him because they saw like, oh man, he fucked up, but now he's trying to make things good again and blah, 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 make amends, whatever. No retweet, no comment I saw ever said, oh yeah, you know what, Ned might actually just be a good dude. That did not happen. So I think that that's also interesting because I think a lot of what he says on interviews about his podcast episode is not based on the episode, it's based on people's responses. So I don't even know how much of his opinions, quote unquote, are actually his opinions versus him responding to the public in a state where he clearly wants people to move on, forgive him, give him another chance, right? And if you're moving through the world, I guess, with this goal of being liked again, because once you were very liked, no one's going to believe you by default because it seems like you'll say anything to be liked. By the way, I realize I'm coming off as a Ned Fulmer hater. The reality is I never watched the Try Guys, and so I have no, parasocial relationship with any of them. I've never seen any of it. I do have a very hard stance on cheating. I have a very hard stance on cheating generally, but especially when there are children involved, because that just fucks shit up for children as well. So my stance with Ned Fulmer is like, this is some cowardly behavior, honestly, if we're really going to go there. But I'll try and hold back.
No, like, people ask me, like, do you forgive Ned for what he did? And I mean, the answer is no. Absolutely not. How can you forgive somebody for lying to you?
This is another clip that went very viral for reasons I don't think I really need to explain, but I think it's an important clip to put in there because, I mean, I think Ned probably already knew the answer to this. I don't think he was shocked, but I do think that in his ideal world, she would have said yes, because in some ways, Ariel's forgiveness would open the door to the public's forgiveness, and granted, he didn't cheat on the public, right? But the public's forgiveness in quotation marks, in the sense of, oh, now that Ariel has kind of given you the green light to kind of forgive yourself and move on and whatever, now the public can do it because they see someone close to you doing it. They see the person you hurt doing it, right? So I think his ideal answer here would have been that she'd say yes, and then, everyone would go on their merry way. But what actually happened is the opposite, because a lot of people were making TikToks about how happy they were that Ariel stood her ground, that she didn't stay with Ned, that she walked away, that she started, kind of a new life, which is the most you can do when you share kids. You can't just disappear and never see the person again when you have kids. So she made a new life as much as she could, and then, decides to not forgive him, because realistically, how do you even forgive that? Again, especially with children in the mix.
I just think, how could you do that to me? Like, who are you? I don't know. I thought we had this love that transcended. I don't know. I trusted you so completely. And I mean, we grew up together. We got married when we were in our early 20s.
Yeah.
We were babies. We had nothing. I mean, we moved out to LA with just our car full of stuff. I mean, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. We were just kids.
I'm so sorry.
We had so much. There was so much. We had so much life left. We still have so much life left. I don't know why I'm crying.
I think it's the loss of that dream that we both had. It felt like that in that time period for me too.
So, first of all, I honestly don't know how Ariel did not become violent. I mean, I would have a very hard time being that calm and civil in a situation like that. I wouldn't resort to violence. Maybe mentally, I'd imagine myself drop kicking someone, but to remain that calm and, not raise your voice, or not even just I know that when I get really mad about something that's really, really hurt me, you'll see physical things. You'll see my eyes look different. I can get slightly shaky just because it's anxiety and stuff like that. There are things you'll notice, right? It's, for the most part, I have it under wraps because, hello, I'm in a PhD program and I can't lose my shit, because if I did, my God, every single class we would have problems. But anyway, her being this composed, I think, is also very telling, because she's there just analyzing things, not from a mean point of view, in my opinion, like as much as she says she doesn't forgive him or whatever, which is normal in my mind. She's very much just logical about it. She's not just like being overly emotional and trying to be the victim. So I think that that's an important thing to note here, because I think that Ned is the one that's trying to come off as the victim, and there's nothing more insufferable than the perpetrator of a crime, a problem, shitty behavior, pretending that they are the victim and they're the one you should feel bad for. And the fact that at the end of this clip, he goes so far as to say that they both lost the dream they had is crazy work, because she lost the dream they had. He did the losing. Like, he made the losing happen, right? So it's like, you can't really claim that you both have this type of loss, because loss is not a choice. Loss happens to you, okay? What he did was he perpetrated that loss, but worst of all, he could have just had a conversation with her if he did want a divorce, if he really was having trouble in the marriage or whatever the case might have been. That could have been a conversation, and then you can say that you both lost the dream because you didn't behave in a way that went contrary to everything you promised. Once you go contrary to everything you promised, you don't get to say you both lost the dream you had. She lost the dream, and you made that happen. So I don't know. It really feels very delusional and almost like he's trying to rewrite history to some extent, which it's like, I was online when all of this was happening. Like, I saw shit come out. So it's like, you can't rewrite history. We all remember, and the digital footprint is there. That's how you got caught in the first place anyway. Hello?
And, it's hard to hear you saying, like, if I don't forgive you. But of course I get it. I mean, you're still very angry.
Yeah, of course I'm angry. Not having sat in this position for 3 years. Yeah, of course I'm still angry. We lost a lot. I found out about your affair from the fans. I mean, somebody sent me a picture, and I couldn't. It's like, for some reason, I didn't see what was actually there in the picture. I thought it was your sister. And I remember sending it to you and being like, what's your sister doing in New York? It was, and I think back on that and I think, like, what was I, like, how did...
So I think this is actually one of the sadder parts of the podcast, because the whole concept of her never even thinking initially that Ned was cheating, and she, like she said in the clip, that she thought Ned was with his sister. That just shows you what kind of faith someone has in you and in your relationship and the strength of your relationship, right? Because if you're a suspicious person, or if the marriage was on the rocks or whatever, it might have been the first conclusion of, like, who's this woman, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that she thought it was his sister, to me, says, oh, this really came out of nowhere. Like, really, she did not know or had no idea. Some might say it's really intense denial. I don't know. But to me, that is one of the saddest parts, because imagine being Ned and you get a text from your wife of a picture of you and the person you're cheating, and she's like, hey, what's your sister doing? Like, I'd like to know what he responded to that, because if I'd been Ned, I would have been losing my fucking mind, being like, holy shit, like, I've been outed, and now how do I explain this? And then, like, if I say it's my sister, when she sees his sister eventually, the truth will come out. So you can't lie that way. So what are you going to do? What are you going to say? And I think it's also important to note that, like she said, she found this out via the fans, which is absolutely insane, because that adds such a disgusting layer to all of this. In the comments of these videos, a lot of people are saying that she's still so angry, and it's so visible that she's angry, but that she's so composed, right? But a lot of people are also saying that this is a conversation that feels like we shouldn't be able to see it. And part of what I wonder about this conversation is, what's the point? And okay, so the point, in my opinion, which is a cynical one, very surprising, I know. My opinion is that Ned is doing this as a form of rehabilitation tour, so to speak. Like, a lot of this has to do with him trying to fix up his image and look like he's a better person and more mature, when the reality is that what you're showing us is a conversation we shouldn't be part of, really. Like, there's no reason we have to see all this. And you're putting Ariel through something which, granted, she agreed to be there. I doubt she was held at gunpoint. But you're making her tell the story of arguably the most painful day of her life, potentially. And she's not gaining anything from that. I mean, like, people will support her, and people already did support her, but she's not gaining anything from that, and you are trying to rehabilitate your image and make money off of it. Even if we look at the very basic details of why this has happened, why this is online, what you're trying to do, you still look bad by default because you're making her talk about something which I honestly doubt that this was her idea, right? So she's kind of doing you a favor by even showing up to that to let you try to rehabilitate your image. But aside from that, it's very transparent that you want people to come to a very particular conclusion. Nothing that's happening in this video to me, or this podcast to me, seems like you being genuine as much as you're trying to reframe yourself as this nice guy who just had a tough time and whatever. And I don't see it that way, and I don't think anyone who has like half a brain cell will see it that way. And beyond that, I mean, we can go into the whole discussion about the dynamics of having an affair with someone who works for you. And I know everyone's tired of hearing about the power dynamic, but realistically, if you're the boss and you're having sex with someone who works for you, the power dynamic conversation is valid because there's a reason that in most companies you're not allowed to date people that are your subordinates, right? So I really don't know why that isn't even a big part of the conversation, because it is, because it's not. Cheating as a general rule is not okay, as we've established. But the fact that you choose to cheat with someone that you work with, that fucks up everyone that you work with, is crazy work also, because it shows that you're selfish and you're unaware, really. You do not have self-awareness. And I think that that's another thing that makes people not like Ned Fulmer, is that there was never an impression, at least from what I've seen, that the Try Guys forgave him either for what he pulled, right? So it's also like, why would the public forgive you if your friends don't, if your ex-wife doesn't? The people who are closest to you and know you best, they're not letting this slide. Why would the public do that? Surely these people know way more than us. So if we know this little and it's still looking terrible, what would encourage people to actually be like, let me give this one guy another try? See what I did there? The last thing I think we should seriously discuss, because holy shit, is that Ned is wrestling now? Question mark, question mark, question mark. That's what's going on in my head. That's really the main thing of why I think he's in some kind of midlife crisis, which, I mean, he caused himself, so the empathy again is there, but very small, like this. There's this clip circulating of Ned wrestling or jumping around in a wrestling arena. So let's read a little article about Ned's wrestling debut. A sentence that just sounds like I shouldn't be able to say, honestly, but anyway. Ex-Try Guys member Ned Fulmer makes bizarre pro wrestling debut. Ned Fulmer made a surprise appearance in Jacksonville, Florida at the AEW Collision tapings. Fulmer appeared in his hometown of Jacksonville, Florida for a surprise dark match for AEW. He wore a blue AEW Duval shirt with cut-off sleeves, teaming with the Spanish Announce Project against the Frat House. I don't know what any of this means, but okay. This follows his reemergence on social media with his new podcast, Rock Bottom with Ned Fulmer. In the debut episode, Fulmer and his estranged wife Ariel sit down for an hour-long episode. In it, they discuss his infidelity and whether or not she forgives him for what happened. In an interview with Rolling Stone, Ned and Ariel open up about their current dynamic, co-parenting their 2 children. Ariel also admits that Ned didn't ask her to do the podcast. She felt it was something necessary for them to do to move on. I stand corrected, because I was certain that he would have asked her. A little odd that she thinks they need it to move on. Then again, perhaps it's also a question of kind of giving the public answers that they want, so then they can actually just stop being asked these questions. I can imagine that might be a reason why. But I still tend to believe that it's probably more Ned's ideas than hers. Like, if it's 55-45, I don't think it's 50-50 regardless. But that's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong. So she explains more on that. To be completely honest, Ned didn't even ask me to do it. It was the sort of situation where I knew that he wanted to go back online, she explained. I don't even remember whose idea it was, but we were having a conversation and I went, well, what if I went on your podcast and what if we talked about us? Ned thought about it a little bit and he was like, well, I mean, I guess if you want to break the internet. He sounds like such a wet blanket all the time. Well, I mean, I guess. Now I'm just being a hater, granted, but he comes off as so entirely unlikable and snaky. Just, I don't like or believe anything here. Ned added, everyone else is stuck in the past, and that kind of makes you feel stuck in the past, and I think we felt that in order to move on to any future project, we were ready to just take that step to share a story and then move on. And that I can completely understand. There are plenty of things that I've seen online of people who had some kind of scandal or something happened and they just need to kind of clear the air and then move on. I think that that kind of loses a little bit of meaning when it's been 3 years, because granted, I don't expect you to do it the day after, right? Because I don't even think Ariel would have wanted to be on like the day after, sure. But 3 years is also so much time that it's like, most people probably don't even remember exactly what happened. I kind of forgot about the scandal entirely until this came up on my timeline, right? So, I mean, whatever. So that's where we're at in terms of Ned Fulmer as of today. I don't really know where he's planning on going from here because I don't really know anyone who wants to necessarily be associated with Ned Fulmer. Not because he's like an overall bad person, because I can't know that. I mean, I doubt your morals and your ethics based on your behavior, but I can't say that you're an entirely bad person, right? What I will say is that I don't really know if I were to be on a podcast, do I want to be sitting in front of someone that realistically I don't respect, I don't trust, I don't believe? Do I want to do that, right? So I'm kind of wondering how people who go on his podcast frame that within their minds, because I can't really imagine anyone being like, yes, this is a great podcast to go on, very inspirational, motivational with this person who destroyed his entire family. But that's just me. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you listened to the episode, let me know how you felt about it, because that podcast to me was like horse tranquilizer. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.